Before we begin, it is important to clarify that the concentration camps explored in this video were not extermination camps like those employed in Nazi Germany during World War II. A better term for them would be internment camps, although such a term does not exist in Spanish. In other words, the Latin American camps were more like camps set up in Canada and the United States. Their main objective was to isolate those the government perceived as a threat to national security. And although these camps were by no means ethical, the inmates were not tortured or killed. With that out of the way, I am Rafa, and these are the forgotten Latin American concentration camps. Just like the other Allied countries, the different Latin American nations took measures to combat Axis influence in the region. Some of these measures included the mass deportation of foreigners, censoring newspapers, and arresting Axis-backed politicians. A very peculiar measure taken by other Allied nations was the creation of internment camps for foreigners who were suspected of engaging in espionage or even commercial activities with the enemy. Oftentimes, people of foreign descent were labeled as quote-unquote aliens. These, of course, were not little green men that came from another planet to subjugate us all. Instead, the term was, at the time of World War II, used to label Italians, Germans, Japanese, and basically anyone whose nation of origin became part of the Axis powers. Similarly to other American countries, Mexico declared its neutrality with the outbreak of war. This neutrality would be severely shaken by the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, because after it, a Pan-American meeting was held in Rio de Janeiro, and after it, Mexico's president at the time, Manuel Ávila Camacho, set in motion a plan to arrest many citizens that the government considered to be dangerous. This situation only got worse in May of 1942, when two Mexican oilers were torpedoed by a German submarine, and in response, Mexico declared war. After the declaration of war, anti-Axis and more specifically anti-German sentiments swept the country. Now that Mexico was at war, the police started to systematically arrest Germans and Japanese who were suspected of being Axis sympathizers. With all these arrests, the Mexican government decided to set up two main internment camps. The first one of these was Fort San Carlos Perote, which was built in the 18th century. Here, an estimated 500 people were held prisoners during World War II. Nevertheless, Mexican historian Carlos Inquen claims that only 89 of those held here faced real criminal charges. In fact, he suggests that corruption and personal interest caused the arrest of many innocent victims. Another location used by Mexican authorities for the internment of suspected foreign agents was the ex-hacienda Temixco. This ex-hacienda is located in the state of Morelos, just south of Mexico City, and what is nowadays a water park used to be an internment camp for several Japanese families living in Mexico. The arrested families were forced to pay for their own food, soap, and pretty much all of their goods. While the adults were forced to work and stay within the property, their children were allowed to venture out into the town, and they could even go to nearby homes, churches, and even the local school. If you are interested in learning a bit more about this specific topic, there's a documentary by El Universal, which I'll leave in the description of this video. Be aware that of course it is in Spanish. Just like Mexico, Colombia was neutral at the beginning of World War II, and similarly to other nations in the continent, it was shaken by the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Japanese aggression caused the Colombian government to break diplomatic relations with the Axis powers, and it stayed that way until the 26th of November of 1943, when Colombia finally declared war on Germany. Later, in March of 1944, Colombian officials arrested 150 people for taking part in commercial activities with the enemy. Their goods were taken over, and around 109 of them were translated to the Sabaneta Hotel. This was a very luxurious hotel that was often visited by high-profile politicians, In fact, many consider it to be the best hotel in the Cundinamarca department because of its Olympic pool and precious gardens. Even then, the lives of the inmates were far from good. They spent most of their days bored, as they were only able to see their families twice a week and could only take care of the gardens to pass time. Many of you could say they were in an enviable position. However, let us place ourselves in their shoes for a moment. You are a German man who has lived in Colombia for over 30 years. Because you worked hard enough, you were able to buy a house and start a business. All of a sudden, you're forced to spend a year under arrest, while the government takes over most of your property and money. All of this because they suspect you made a deal with German, Italian, or Japanese companies. And even when in jail, you're forced to pay for your room. I don't think anyone would like to be in the situation. When war broke out in Europe, many feared that due to ideological similitudes, Venezuela would align itself with Nazi Germany. Fortunately, Venezuela stayed neutral during most of the war and provided the Allies with huge amounts of crude oil. After breaking diplomatic relations with the Axis in 1942, Venezuela reformed its foreign activities law. With this change came new articles which allowed for the creation of concentration camps exclusively targeted at foreign populations. This topic has not been widely covered in Venezuela, and a lot of information is still not available to the general public. What we do know is that around 800 people were interned in several concentration camps in the states of Lara and Trujillo. And lastly, if anyone knows of any other Latin American countries which have implemented similar programs during World War II, be sure to let me know in the comment section below. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and if that was the case, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel for more history content. I'll see you on the next one.